CEO laughed at the single dad's lunchbox, until his daughter called her new mommy Diana Calloway laughed first. Kevin Marsh laughed second. Tanya Reid, as she always did, followed. "Is this a daycare now?" Diana said, loudly enough for the entire Apex Technologies cafeteria to hear. She stood at the entrance in a tailored charcoal blazer, coffee in hand, flanked by her VP of Operations and her Senior Director of Marketing. The three of them watched as Marcus Webb sat hunched at a corner table, unpacking a small princess-themed lunchbox, carefully arranging a star-shaped sandwich on a plastic divided plate. The little girl beside him was 6 years old. She had her father's serious dark eyes and a gap where her two front teeth used to be. Kevin Marsh tilted his head. The engineering team does seem to struggle with work-life boundaries. He said it to Diana, but loud enough that Marcus heard. Several employees glanced over. A few smiled uncomfortably. Tanya Reid's lip curled. Some people simply cannot separate home from office. Marcus heard every word. He kept his eyes on Zoe's plate, adding the tiny heart-shaped crackers she liked. He did not look up. He did not say anything. Diana watched him for one more moment. The princess lunchbox, the star sandwich, the man in an unremarkable button-down who didn't bother to defend himself, then shook her head, murmured something to Kevin that made him laugh again, and they walked past. What Diana Calloway didn't know was that the man at that corner table had once run a tech company she would have paid $300 million to acquire. What none of them knew was that in 3 weeks, Kevin Marsh would lose his project. Tanya Reid would be quietly relocated, and Diana Calloway would be asking Marcus Webb if he wanted to get dinner. The little girl eating the star sandwich would have something to do with all of it. 4 hours earlier, Marcus Webb had woken up at 5:15 in the morning, and the day had already started going sideways. He was halfway through Zoe's lunch when his phone rang. The school, this time. A burst pipe in the building. Closing for the day. No remote learning. Too many kindergartners for that to work. His sister-in-law, who usually helped on surprise days, was 2 states away at a soccer tournament. The babysitter's car was, as of 20 minutes ago, on the highway shoulder in 3 separate pieces. Marcus stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the half-made princess sandwich. He'd been making them for 18 months. That was how long Sarah had been gone. It had started as her thing. Sarah Webb had a gift for making ordinary mornings feel like something worth keeping. Star-shaped crackers. A tiny folded note tucked under the napkin. Every lunch, a small occasion. When Zoe was 3, she'd cried because the sandwich wasn't shaped like a moon, and Sarah had laughed and promised, next Tuesday. Sarah never saw next Tuesday. Marcus finished the sandwich. He added the note. Zoe's day. Excellent. He packed the princess lunchbox, put it in her backpack, got Zoe dressed in her purple polka dot shirt, found her coloring book, and drove to work with a 6-year-old in the back seat asking if computers had feelings. Some of them act like it, he said. Does yours? Not today. Today it just needs to work. He'd been a senior software engineer at Apex Technologies for 11 months. The job was below him, substantially, and he knew it. He'd co-founded TrueCore Systems 7 years ago, served as CTO through its entire lifespan, and sold the company for $180 million when Zoe was 4. He could have retired. He could have taken any of the 3 executive offers sitting in his inbox the week Sarah was diagnosed. He'd taken none of them. He'd taken Apex, specifically because the hours were stable. The parking was 4 blocks from Zoe's school, and his manager, James Okonkwo, was a calm, decent man who never expected Marcus to be more than he wanted to be. For 11 months, that had been enough. Marcus set Zoe up at the small table in the corner of his office with her coloring book and a set of markers, gave her a serious look, and said, "The rules. No yelling," Zoe said. "Correct. No running in the halls." Also correct. She picked up a purple marker. He went back to his laptop. James Okonkwo appeared in the doorway at 8:40. He looked at Zoe. He looked at Marcus. He handed Marcus a coffee. "The systems review," he said quietly. "Is it 2? "I know. Diana wants the architecture presentation. It's ready." James glanced at Zoe again. She was coloring a horse with solemn precision. He had opinions. He kept them to himself and left. The firmware call ran long. By 11:15, Marcus needed lunch, and Zoe needed her lunchbox. The cafeteria was the cleanest option. He hadn't counted on Diana Calloway walking through with Kevin Marsh and Tanya Reid at 11:52. He had heard every word. He hadn't looked up because Zoe was watching him, and he refused to let his daughter see anything on his face she'd need to ask questions about later. He just kept adding the crackers, one by one. The 2 o'clock systems review was in conference room A, glass walls, 12 chairs, and the particular silence of a room where people were performing attentiveness rather than feeling it. Marcus set up his laptop. His architecture presentation was 32 slides, tight, specific, built on 11 months of quietly studying Apex's processing bottlenecks and redesigning the entire framework from its foundation. If implemented, the new system would reduce server latency by 67% and cut operating costs by 1/3. He had verified the numbers twice. He had built every line alone. Kevin Marsh arrived with 4 slides and enormous confidence. Diana Calloway sat at the head of the table in the same charcoal blazer from the cafeteria. She did not look at Marcus when he entered. She had not looked at him with any particular interest in the 11 months he'd worked at Apex. He was, to her, a name on an org chart. "Engineering," she said, clicking her pen. "Go." Marcus stood. He pulled up his first slide. He had spoken for 40 seconds when Kevin interrupted. "I want to jump in here," Kevin said smoothly, "because there's important context for the architecture direction." He looked at Diana. "The framework Marcus is presenting was initially scoped by my team. We collaborated on the foundation." Marcus stopped. The room was quiet. James Okonkwo, 2 seats to Marcus's left, went very still. Marcus looked at Kevin. Kevin met his gaze with perfectly calibrated calm, the expression of a man who had done this before and had never once been held to it. "The architecture," Marcus said carefully, "was built entirely by me. I have version history from day 1, of course. I just meant, then, let me finish." The room was quiet in a way it hadn't been before. Several people studied their laptops. Diana's pen clicked once. Marcus turned back to his slides. He presented for 22 minutes. No one interrupted again. When he finished, Diana set down her pen. "It's interesting, but I want Kevin's team to run a parallel assessment before we commit." "There is no parallel architecture," Marcus said. "Kevin's team has 4 slides. "Then it shouldn't take long," Diana said. "We'll reconvene in 2 weeks." The meeting ended. People filed out. James caught Marcus in the hallway. "That was not nothing," he said quietly. "It was nothing," Marcus said. James did not agree. It showed on his face. The email came Thursday morning. Marcus read it twice. Kevin Marsh had officially submitted the architecture to Diana as a team systems initiative, with Kevin listed as project lead. Marcus's name appeared deep in the body text as a contributing engineer. He forwarded the email to James. James appeared in his doorway 4 minutes later. "It's my work," Marcus said. He wasn't raising his voice. "Every line. 11 months, I know. All of it." "Marcus." James sat down. closed the door. If you push back on Kevin directly, Diana reads it as a team dynamic issue. You'll be the one managed out. Marcus said nothing. Give me until Monday, James said. I'm going to make some calls. Marcus nodded. He looked at the Princess lunchbox still sitting in the corner of his desk where he'd left it Tuesday. He picked it up and looked at it for a moment without any particular expression. Then, he opened his laptop. He pulled up a contact he hadn't reached in over a year. Gregory Hayes, the Apex board chair, who had twice, in quiet passing, mentioned that if Marcus ever wanted to talk, he was available. Marcus typed a short message. Attached the version history. Attached 11 months of time-stamped commits. He looked at it for a moment. Then he pressed send. He wasn't sure anything would come of it, but he had a daughter who needed him to keep going. And he had always believed that the truth could hold its own weight if you gave it enough time. The Apex production servers went down at 3:18 p.m. on Friday. Not slow. Not degraded. Down, fully the kind of outage that costs a company $400,000 per hour and moves executives into a specific quality of quiet, controlled panic. Kevin Marsh was in the server room by 3:22, on his phone with the infrastructure vendor, who was telling him 17 things, none of them useful. By 3:40, Kevin had assembled 4 engineers around him. By 4:00, they had located the cascade point. By 4:15, they had tried 3 things and made it worse. Diana Calloway stood near the server room door with her arms crossed. She said nothing. Her jaw was tight. Kevin was mid-sentence describing a patch approach when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He had been reviewing the cascade logs on his laptop for 32 minutes. He knew what the problem was. He had not yet said so, because no one had asked him, and he'd spent the last 32 minutes watching Kevin's solution solidify into something that was going to cause a secondary cascade. Diana looked up. Webb, you've been standing there. Say something useful or leave. Kevin's patching the wrong junction, Marcus said. It'll stabilize for 40 minutes and then cascade again. Worse, silence. Kevin turned. That's log file 31, line 447. Marcus opened his laptop, turned the screen toward the room. The root cause is in the authentication handshake, not the server load. If you implement Kevin's patch, you're buying time. You're not solving anything. Diana looked at the screen. She looked at Kevin. Fix it, she said to Marcus. He fixed it. 42 minutes. The servers came back online at 5:07 p.m. The server room was very quiet afterward. Kevin said he had a head start on the diagnostics. Nobody responded to this. Not one person in the room. Diana stood near the doorway and watched Marcus close his laptop. He felt her looking. He didn't acknowledge it. He had somewhere to be. Zoe's school had a pickup grace period that ended at 5:30, and he was already running behind. He picked up his bag and left without speaking. What Diana stood with, alone in the server room for the next few minutes, was something she hadn't felt in a long time. The specific, humbling awareness that she had badly misjudged someone. What she didn't know yet was that Gregory Hayes had already read Marcus's email. He'd forwarded the version history to an independent auditor at 2:00 p.m. on Thursday, 18 hours before the server crisis, and had already scheduled an all-hands meeting for Monday. By the time Diana got home Friday night, the audit was complete. By Sunday, Gregory had made several phone calls. By Monday, nothing at Apex was going to look the way it had on Friday. The all-hands meeting was called for noon. Nobody told Marcus why. His badge still worked. He sat in the back of the main auditorium with James, who seemed to know something, and had chosen not to say what, which Marcus had learned to read as a signal that required patience rather than questions. Gregory Hayes stood at the front, 62, silver-haired, the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. He ran board meetings in 20 minutes and never said anything he didn't intend. He welcomed the room, made several brief announcements about Q3 numbers, mentioned the server outage, resolved efficiently due to engineering expertise, and let that sit. Then he said, "I want to talk about the Apex processing architecture, the framework in development that will, when implemented, reduce latency by 67% and cut server costs by a third." Kevin Marsh, 3 rows ahead of Marcus, sat up slightly straighter. Gregory clicked to a new slide. A version history. 11 months of timestamps. Every commit attached to the same user credential. Our independent audit, Gregory said, found that this architecture was authored entirely by one person. Every iteration, every core decision, every line. He paused. Marcus Webb. The auditorium went quiet. Kevin Marsh's back went rigid. Tanya Reid, 2 seats from him, looked at her phone, then at the screen, then at her phone again. Diana Calloway sat in the front row. She didn't move. Gregory clicked to the next slide. Marcus recognized it before he registered what it was, a Forbes article from 3 years ago. The headline, Marcus Webb, TrueCore CTO, leads $180 platform acquisition. Below it, a photograph. Marcus, younger, in a suit, standing at a boardroom table. "Some of you know Marcus," Gregory said. "Most of you apparently did not. He has been your senior software engineer for 11 months. A pause. His voice was dry. "I'm not entirely certain how we let that happen." A few nervous laughs. "Marcus." Gregory looked toward the back of the auditorium. "Come up, please." Marcus stood. He was in the same unremarkable button-down he wore every Monday. He walked to the front of the room and stood next to Gregory Hayes and did not look at Kevin Marsh. Not because he was avoiding it, but because Kevin Marsh was not the most important thing in the room. He looked at Diana. She was already looking at him. Her expression was unreadable. But her jaw was tight, and he could see exactly what she was processing: the cafeteria, the princess lunchbox, the star-shaped sandwich, the laugh she'd shared with Kevin and Tanya while Zoe sat beside him, quietly eating crackers. Gregory made a few additional remarks. Marcus stood at the front and let the room be what it was. Afterward, people approached. Colleagues he barely knew, shaking his hand. He accepted this calmly. Kevin Marsh walked past without speaking. His face was the color of old paper Tanya Reid found somewhere else to be. James appeared at Marcus's elbow and said nothing, just handed him a coffee. Diana found him near the side exit 20 minutes later, when the room had mostly cleared. She stood a foot away and looked at him the way someone looks at a calculation they got badly wrong and need to understand. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. 11 months. You didn't say one word." Marcus thought about how to answer this. The hours were stable. My daughter's school is 4 blocks away. Diana looked like that wasn't the answer she expected. That's it? The work was interesting. He paused. I wasn't hiding anything. I just wasn't interested in being known for what I used to be. A long beat. In the cafeteria, Diana said. She didn't finish the sentence. You didn't know. I didn't ask. She held his gaze. I should have asked. Marcus said nothing to this. He picked up his bag. My daughter has ballet at 6. He looked at her once. Not warmly, not coldly. Honestly, she's hard to disappoint. He left. Diana stood in the empty hallway for a while. What she was sitting with wasn't entirely guilt, and wasn't entirely admiration. It was something between the two that she was going to need some time to find the right word for. But the consequences of Monday were only beginning. By Tuesday morning, Kevin Marsh had been removed from the systems initiative. By Wednesday, Gregory Hayes had called Marcus with a new title, Principal Architect, effective immediately. By Thursday, Diana had made a reservation at a restaurant she'd been intending to try for months. She sent one text to a contact she'd quietly added to her phone after looking up Apex's employee directory. 3 words, "Could we talk?" Marcus replied 4 hours later. 2 words, "Tuesday." 6. Kevin Marsh's removal from the systems initiative was formal by Tuesday morning. The internal memo cited leadership and project alignment. His team was absorbed into James Okonkwo's department. Kevin stayed at the company in a significantly reduced capacity, leading documentation review, a project everyone needed and nobody wanted. He didn't discuss the architecture audit in any room with more than 2 people. Whatever he told himself in private about how it had happened, he kept entirely to himself. Tanya Reid was relocated to the Chicago office 6 weeks later. Officially, this had nothing to do with a cafeteria comment on a Tuesday in November. Tanya seemed to understand what it actually had to do with. She accepted the transfer without comment. Marcus heard about Kevin's reassignment from James, who delivered the news with his usual neutral face and said nothing further. Marcus nodded once, went back to his code. He felt nothing resembling satisfaction, just the dull, specific acknowledgement that these things tend to settle. Eventually, if you wait long enough and do your work. He called Zoe that afternoon to tell her he'd be home by 5. "Is the pretty lady coming to dinner?" Zoe asked. Marcus paused. "What pretty lady?" "The one in the gray jacket, from your office building." He had not mentioned Diana once. Not at home, not in passing, not in any way. Then he remembered, during the server crisis, while he'd been deep in the diagnostic logs, Zoe had wandered the executive floor for approximately 11 minutes before James had found her and brought her back. He had assumed she'd sat in a waiting area and colored. He now understood this was not what had happened. "Not tonight," he said carefully. "Okay," Zoe said. She sounded mildly, but not devastatingly, disappointed 3 months later. Marcus woke at 6:15, not 5:15. He'd been sleeping better, slowly, the way good things accumulate when you stop trying to force them. Zoe's bedroom door was open. He could hear her already talking to her stuffed animals about something procedural. He packed the lunchbox anyway. He'd found a new one, shaped like a castle, and he put in a moon sandwich, because he had remembered the promise, even if it was 11 months overdue. The birthday party was at 2. Purple streamers. A banner that said Zoe is 7. Princess plates that Zoe had chosen herself from a catalog with the seriousness of a professional. Diana arrived at 1 o'clock with a wrapped present bearing an embarrassing number of ribbons. Zoe had requested them specifically. Via text. Marcus had not given Zoe his phone. He had stored this away as a conversation for a later date. Zoe opened the door and said, without any preamble, "You're the pretty lady." Diana looked at her seriously. "I've been told. My dad talks about you." "Zoe," Marcus said. "He says you're smart." "Zoe." He didn't say pretty, but I could tell from how he said smart. Diana's expression, controlled and composed in every professional context Marcus had ever observed, broke entirely. She laughed. A real one. It changed her face in a way that took him a moment to process. The party went the way 6-year-old birthday parties go. Loud, sweet, briefly chaotic. Marcus's team came. James brought his wife. The castle lunchbox sat on the kitchen counter, and someone photographed it without asking. Zoe won 2 rounds of a board game against adults who were, Marcus suspected, letting her, and 1 round that was entirely legitimate. Near the end, Zoe climbed into Diana's lap with the confidence of someone who had already made her decision and was only informing the adults. She said, into the general noise of the kitchen, "I'm going to call you new mommy." The room didn't exactly go silent, but the specific corner of it did. Marcus looked at Diana. Diana looked at Marcus. Zoe was not looking at either of them. She had found a star-shaped sticker and was applying it to Diana's sleeve with absolute focus. Marcus said, "Quietly, you don't have to, I know," Diana said. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at Zoe. Something had shifted in her face, something careful and enormous that she wasn't going to name here, not in front of an audience, not yet. She smoothed Zoe's hair back from her face. "Next Tuesday," she said. Zoe looked up. "For what?" "For anything," Diana said. "I'll be here." Marcus looked away. Through the kitchen window, the late afternoon sun was going long in gold across the yard. It wasn't everything. Not yet. 2 people being careful, both of them scared of the same things for different reasons, neither of them moving faster than they knew was right. But it was more than this morning, more than last month, more than the man in the unremarkable button-down who hadn't been seen for 11 months, and the woman in the charcoal blazer who had looked right at him and missed everything that mattered. They'd both been somewhere else, for a long time. They were both slowly finding their way back, and in a kitchen full of purple streamers and princess plates and a castle lunchbox with a moon sandwich inside. A 6-year-old's birthday party that was also quietly the beginning of something. That was enough.